The thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your host, Jason Beck, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Oh, yeah. Good morning, everybody. That's right. Happy Monday, you guys. It is Monday, June 2nd, you guys. And today is International Volkswagen Bus Day today, you guys. Really? No summer of love, no love bus love, huh? Today? Interesting. Well, it's also National Rotisserie Chicken Day today.
Rotisserie chicken?
Yes, rotisserie chicken.
Turn and burn, baby. Turn and burn.
And it is also National Bubba Day.
Bubba Gump?
You know,
I love my Bubba.
That's a great question, Jesse. And
Bubbas in general.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see what it says.
No, that's what Southern people call their brothers.
Is that what
really?
it is? National Bubba Day recognizes all those who lovingly call Bubba in our lives. The name may come from the way young children try to shorten the word brother.
You're welcome.
Look at that.
Wow. Everybody get you a Southern friend, because it should not have been like a home.
So I never knew that. That's pretty good. You know what I'm saying? Often used as an affectionate nickname for a brother, and many close family and friends use the name Bubba as a term of endearment. And through the years, you may have met many Bubbas, or maybe you only know just one. I know Bubba Kush.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
It doesn't count. What about Big Bubba?
Anyhow, moving along, little Bubba.
It's also National Leave the Office Early Day today, you guys.
Shit, yeah, I'm celebrating.
Yeah.
Michael grabs briefcase, slams laptop shut till tomorrow.
Right. And it is also National Rocky Road Day today, you guys.
Oh, it's one of the best
Okay,
ice creams.
not my favorite. I'm not a marshmallow girl.
No, you don't like marshmallows?
No, I prefer bunny tracks. That stuff that Bluebell made that's got the little chocolate peanut butter bunnies in it. It's delicious.
Oh, that sounds pretty good. I've never had that. That sounds pretty good though.
You would enjoy it.
Amazing. And thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above and down below to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, X, Instagram, Facebook, Kick, as well as on our very own website at www.highat9news.com. So welcome to everyone joining us from any one of those platforms. And we are starting this off with Miss Jenny Beth Dills. She's the founder of Kind Cannabis and of Justice Served, a 501c3 that can help you get your life back on track if you've been a victim of the track. That's right, it's America's sweetheart. It is none other than Miss Jenny Beth Dills.
All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Good morning, Jason.
I can't wait for your story.
I can't wait for my story, too, because it chaps my ass. So this story comes from the High at 9 News, and it's an original by me.
Yes.
Yeah. That's how mad I am about this situation, you guys. All right. In a move sending shockwaves through California's cannabis industry, a new proposal in the state budget could dramatically expand the enforcement powers of the Department of Cannabis Control, or the DCC, shifting its role from regulatory agency to full-fledged law enforcement authority. And here's what's on the table. The California Department of Cannabis Control, created to regulate the state's massive legal cannabis market, is now seeking law enforcement powers that go far beyond traditional regulatory oversight. According to the proposed 2025-2026 state budget, the DCC would be authorized to conduct undercover investigations, execute unannounced inspections with expanded search and seizure authority, preserve and collect evidence much like traditional law enforcement agencies. In a significant departure from its current role, the DCC would also have formal authority to collaborate directly with federal agencies, including the DEA, IRS, and FBI, and local police departments. This would allow joint investigations targeting both licensed businesses and the illicit market, data sharing agreements to access federal criminal databases and tax filings, multi-agency task forces that can cross city, county, and even state lines, and interstate coordination with other cannabis legal states to conduct enforcement actions and intelligence sharing. The DCC would further integrate cutting-edge technology deploying AI-driven compliance monitoring systems, real-time tracking of inventory and supply chains, digital surveillance of online marketplaces, and social media for potential violations. Critically, the DCC would have expanded authority to access financial and banking records, a power typically reserved for financial crimes divisions and federal law enforcement. These moves mark a sharp escalation from the agency's current function, which is focused mainly on licensing, compliance checks, and administrative enforcement. Alongside these expanded powers, the budget proposal also includes stricter penalties for compliance violations, progressive fines tied to a business's gross revenue, accelerated license suspensions and revocations with limited appeal rights, mandatory third-party audits at licensees' expense, and increased operational restrictions for those under investigation. Industry groups are sounding the alarm. They warn the proposed changes could drive small businesses out of the market due to skyrocketing compliance costs, lead to greater market consolidation favoring large, well-capitalized operators, chill innovation and new product development, and potentially violate constitutional rights, including protections against unreasonable search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment. Legal experts point out that collaboration with federal agencies, especially the DEA, raises red flags, given that cannabis remains illegal under federal law, even as California has legalized its use. Advocates for the cannabis industry are calling for immediate action, urging licensed operators to contact their legislative representatives, demand public hearings before these powers are granted, and push for the establishment of an independent oversight committee to monitor the DCC's activities. Without legislative intervention, the budget and these sweeping new authorities could be finalized by June 15th, with enforcement powers taking effect by July 1. The stakes are high not just for California's $5 billion cannabis market, but for the future of cannabis regulation nationwide. As one advocate put it, this is a turning point. If these powers are granted, the DCC will no longer be a regulator. It will be a law enforcement agency. We'll definitely be continuing to follow the story closely as the budget process moves forward. For now, California's cannabis operators face an uncertain and potentially much more heavily policed future. So let's break down the reasons why this chaps my ass. One, the DCC has been doing a tremendous amount of no-knock inspections. That's a no-notice. They show up at your door, much like they are the police. Clearly, they're not supposed to do that. If they were supposed to do that, they wouldn't be asking for permission now to do that. Two, the DCC does a horrible job in pushing through licensing. It takes them a tremendous amount of time. The conversation between the applicant, and the DCC has been very, very, very staggered. They need to focus on that first, and maybe also, on how to regulate labs properly. You cannot have the same governing body regulate and enforce. That's not how this works. They are not the police. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment says that they're not supposed to have federal intervention in state legal cannabis operations. So the fact that they're trying to work with the FBI, the DEA, go undercover, do all these things, like, you're not the fucking cops. If you wanted to be a police officer, Mr. DCC inspector, and I'm going through a bunch of inspections right now with some applicants and some owners, so please just don't, whatever, you're fucking us in the ass anyway. Please go to the police academy, because that's not what this is supposed to be. You are a regulator. You are to provide regulatory oversight. And I've time and time again watched operators say, hey, they came in, here's what they're saying the issue is, but they're not giving me an avenue to fix it, or they're not responding to my emails, or they're this, or they're that. I've got an operator that's been shut down since Good Friday trying to get through an inspection. It's insane. It's insane. What's stacking up? Rent, electrical bills, all those other things. We're losing employees because nobody's going to sit there and wait months while you figure out if you're going to let us operate or not. Like, this is insane. And this is telling me that you guys have no intention of letting us operate or wanting us to operate, period. It's really scary. And I mean, are they going to ask to carry guns as well? It sounds like it. So this could change the trajectory of where California is. And the fact that they have had so much egg on their face because some operators have thrown it there is really frustrating, because you're going to see good operators go out of business because they can't afford these enforcement costs. If the police pull me over on the 101, I'm not going to pay him for his gas and his time while we're on the side of the road. This is absolutely asinine. I'm going to have more to complain about because this one personally pisses me off. But there you go. Original story by Jenny B.
Look at that. Love this, Jenny Beth. Love a good original story. Do we who put this, who introduced this legislation? Do we know? Because someone sent me a white paper over the weekend asking my thoughts on this, and it is a 9-page white paper on this that you did this write up on, and that'll all be on our website for people to be able to go and read for themselves. I'm really curious as to who introduced this as a possible legislation. And
this was a budget proposal by the DCC.
Got it. So this hasn't been adopted as far as by any member of the assembly to be able to introduce this into the budget formally. That's the
scary part. It's not being introduced as far as a legislative session, Jason. It's being introduced as part of a budgetary proposal for the state of California's 2025-2026 budget year. So the fact that they're trying to circumvent this whole, well, we need to talk about it and make a decision on June 15th and then start this shit on July 1st is a full circumvention of everything, not to mention trying to shorten the remedies that operators have if they do get regulatory issues.
Yeah.
Like, come on, there's already not proper due process. You're already not letting people fucking fight for their licenses and their businesses. You're already not allowing people to defend themselves or ask questions or say anything. And there needs to be an oversight of the DCC. The fact that I can email the lead investigator for weeks without a fucking response, the fact that we're like, we can't, I live in Orange County. There's no one there to let you in our building right now. I'm happy to come do it. Can we get this scheduled? Within a reasonable amount of time. I asked for 48 hours, I believe. And they don't respond. And then I finally get a response a week later. And that response happens to be, I'm going out of office. You went on fucking vacation.
Yeah.
You didn't pass it to someone else. Meanwhile, our metric is shut down and no one can operate. And you're somewhere sipping a Mai Tai on a beach somewhere with your feet in the sand. Like, this is not acceptable. But this was the DCC's budget proposal and what they're requesting to have powers to do. And if you please read the white paper, because that is actually where this article came from. And I did not have time on this morning's show to throw in every inflammatory detail, but it will piss you off.
Yeah, no, it definitely will. I was reading this. I was like, who made this? Like this is like so pro law enforcement every single which way and all day. And it makes me wonder, because I remember in the beginning of legalization, we had a cultivation cultivation visit from the DCC at one of our cultivation facilities, and there was just like a random thing, and she pulled me back in the back room, and I was asking her, I was like, how did you start working for this? How'd you apply for this job or whatnot? And she said she used to be a DEA agent, and then the budget got cut or whatnot, so she got cut, and so she applied for this job because she wanted to arrest people for drugs.
See, that's crazy. And like another portion of this is it's a budgetary thing, and it's a revenue generation. The DCC is bleeding out of their ass right now, despite all the egregious fees. Why? Because their budget is overinflated. But this will allow them to pull money from law enforcement budgets. It will allow them to pull money from the general fund. Yeah. Which we pay into. It will allow them to get money that is set aside for crime prevention in the state of California. And that's not their job. Their job is to regulate a legal industry.
way I see it, it just looks like it's a step backwards. It's a continuation of them pushing people to the black market with the taxation issues that they're doing with it, and then this super regulatory oversight. And I mean, realistically, if things are shipped across state lines or bad actors, that's when law enforcement gets involved in the DEA and stuff like that. But there should absolutely be, no law enforcement section in something that has been legalized for adults 21 plus. It's a compliance issue, it's a fine issue, and it sounds like the regulators don't even have enough people currently to go out and do the proper inspections and to help businesses thrive. Yet they want the tax dollars. It sounds like a mess and pure stupidity, honestly, from my position.
Yarrow, go for it, man. I know you have all kinds. Go for it. I know you just.
I want to know, did you like my story I wrote for you, Yarrow?
It was excellent.
I like the other story you wrote for me, that 72 Shades of Grey.
That love story.
Better read, but I mean, I'm sad. I'm just sad. The promise of regulated cannabis and the express end of prohibition, unless we were talking about cartel grows creating environmental degradation on BLM land. It sounds like this is kind of the final nail in the coffin for a vision of a healthy, vibrant, safe, regulated, and profitable industry. And I've always said on the show, we just want parity. We just want to be treated like any other industry. And so as Jenny was sharing some of this, I was thinking, wow, those sound like some pretty extreme overreaches. The bank statements, the this, the that. And so I was trying to think in my mind if there are other industries where that level of intrusion is required in order to participate. Hoping that I could find other examples so that I could say, well, this is still parity. We're being treated like any other business. And maybe if you have a casino license, for example, they are allowed access to your books. The cooperation with federal law enforcement, meaning the DEA and the FBI, seems like a new low, though, because those agencies have already been enforcing against cannabis and haven't stopped, and there doesn't necessarily, in my mind, need to be a level of coordination. I'm very troubled. This industry, especially in California, needs a shot in the arm, not a kick in the ass. And I'm not sure how we get there with all of this. And I worry that we're just going to continue to see a bleeding out of money, a bleeding out of time, and a bleeding out of talent. California has a lot of talented people. And in a perfect world, that talent is celebrated, amplified, and then even trained and promoted and pushed out into newer adult use markets so that people can export their know-how. I don't know how we get there at this point. I mean, I don't want to be the negative Nancy on a Monday morning, and maybe it's just because my only half a cup of coffee's kicking in, but I don't know how we get there from all of this. And I've gone through some of this system, frustratingly not been able to get my oar in the water, waiting for the build out of the retailer so I can run a distribution business, having onboarded some of these funds, having jumped through hoops to comply with that, or them asking me for stuff I don't even know how to provide, like computer logs for a computer I bought with grant money. They want a log. I'm like on YouTube trying to figure out how you get a computer log and then send it to them. You know, they're like, sorry, we don't accept PDFs. I'm like, well, what do you accept? Sorry, we don't accept Google Drive links. I'm like, well, what do you accept? I'm 52. I'm not a tech guy, you know? So it's really shaping up to be, I think, a painful black eye on the history of cannabis. And I'm thinking about the state fair and how excited I am next month to go there and be a part of, you know, the first state fair in the history of the country that has a cannabis competition, and how cool that is. And then I'm looking at all this stuff that's happening in the regulated space, and it's like, you can't celebrate the best of the best if you don't help everybody to create their best. And so we have to have a regulatory framework that supports our entrepreneurs, that supports innovation, that supports sustainable wages. I don't know at this point how we get there.
Well, the scary part is it's not just cooperation. They want to collaborate. They want to be able to do missions with the FBI and the DEA as if they're trained to do so. I mean, there was a time when at least most of the people at the DCC pretended like they wanted us to be able to operate, right? Like, I mean, it could have been bullshit, but they at least pretended like, hey, we're trying to support you. We're going to, here's the resources. Here's what we can do to help, which, I mean, come on, whatever. But, I mean, I haven't had any Diet Coke yet. So Yarrow may be half caffeinated, but I have none, and I'm pissed off. Like, I'm literally running on anxiety and frustration at this point in time. And it just, to see the way that the DCC has already egregiously overstepped what it should be doing as a regulatory body. Like, come in, yeah, fine. But if it takes you 3 weeks to say a word to us about what we need to fix or what needs to happen, like, these things need to, come on, like, let's go.
Pick up the pace, drink some of Kubrin's coffee. So I'd like to think that, at the top of that organization, I mean, Nicole Elliott ran San Francisco before she ran the state agency. She was always pleasant, accessible. I was able to get a meeting with her when she was in San Francisco. I like to think that they're not looking to burn the ship they're sailing. I'd like to think that. I also know a couple people who work at the DCC, a gal I went to junior high school with who was really excited to get hired by them in this last year. My brother went to high school with a guy who's an attorney who recently went to work there. And those people are not let me kick down doors and zip tie people's arms behind their back type folks. The challenge, I think, becomes, what's the net impact of the organization? I would also say that when we looked at the beginning of onboarding an adult use program, there was a seeding of people with law enforcement experience into a variety of organizations, not just the DCC. If you look at Fish and Game and Wildlife, there were a ton of people who used to be kicking down doors and enforcing against cannabis cultivation and distribution, who literally just changed uniforms. And now they had like a park ranger uniform on instead of like a tactical vest or Kevlar. And they were no longer men and women in blue. They were men and women in like sort of olive green. But we also see that in code enforcement. And so you would think that people who went into code enforcement or were previous builders or contractors, architects. And I know here locally that, they were previous FBI agents and they went into cannabis code enforcement. So that trend I've seen for a while, but it troubles me because when I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. For cannabis with the International Cannabis Bar Association and get up on stage and chitty chat for a second and, had this moment in the limelight and was like, wow, we're moving forward. The woman who ran the cannabis agency in Colorado had the exact opposite to say. She said, my predecessor wore a sidearm. And when I came into this position, I said to myself, I'm not wearing a sidearm because that's not the tone I want to set in how I regulate the industry. And I just looked at her and like hearts were shooting out of my eyes like, girl, you got me at hello, little heart shapes. So if we're doing it the opposite in California, I wonder, where is the data that the DCC is using to chart this direction and to say, well, it's working, this direction is working over in this market or this mature market. It's working in Colorado. It's working in Washington. It's working in Oregon. Because if that's not the case, and we're going to fall into the same policy missteps that we did before, which was this terrible analogy that became like vomited cliche, which is, oh, we're building the airplane while we fly it. And so if we're building the airplane while we fly it, technically that analogy means the airplane crashes every single time.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a definite shift in the people who are employed at the DCC. It's very clear that they want to shut licenses down. And yes, I understand that this is California and there's a lot of fuckery that's going on, right? Like there's a lot of people who are diverting product. There's a lot of people who are doing, just blatantly, right? But that shouldn't be a burden to the entire industry, to all the good operators that are out there, to people who are just trying to comply, to somebody who maybe had a management company that they trusted to run their operations while they're not looking and got screwed. That's not what this is about, and that's not what they should be about. They should be about helping people fix it, figure out what we need to do. If you really, 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 truly were just like, hey, screw you guys, we're going to trap till we die, then that's a different issue. But that's not 90% of the operators in California. And the fact that this is going to affect that 90% is not fair. The fact that the DCC has the fucking audacity to try and turn back federal policy and get the FBI and the DEA back involved in California cannabis operations should frankly scare the shit out of all you guys. Mm-hmm. There should be no reason why the DCC guy who got hired from God knows where should be able to go through your criminal history, should be able to search you in an FBI database, they don't even have clearance for those levels of access to things. This makes no fucking sense. It's absolute overreach, and I'm going to probably be really pissed off for a few days.
Well, it's not overreach, it's reach around. Because in order for you to even get a permit through the DCC, you have to provide your criminal record, which is an FBI database to begin with. So It's not like they don't have access to that information before they decide whether you're a good enough apple to be in the little regulated ecosystem to begin with.
Yep, this is a problem, and this is going to continue. And we're way over time on this, and we're going to go to our first commercial, and we're going to be right back.
Great.
Oh man, your knees still bothering you, man?
Yeah, I left one, and I'll tell you what, I've been using this new CBD cream, and it works like a miracle.
CBDs? I done heard about them CBDs. I was out there on them Twitters the other day, and I heard they get you high as a kite.
Well, not this stuff. This stuff is tested. Every batch, all the way through, pharmaceutical grade, and in a GMP certified facility. So you're not going to have to worry about flying high.
GMP certified? I might have to try some of this out. Where will I even find this?
You go directly to aimhighhemp.com and they will ship it to your door right away. Test it. It's not a name, it's a promise.
Fair enough. I love that.
All right.
Let's drive some traffic.
Yes, and we are back, you guys. And all right, well, fine. And you guys, come on, Jenny. The Trump administration still hasn't decided on challenging cannabis and gun rights case, you guys. And they're getting more time from the Supreme Court. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, Michael. The Trump administration has not yet decided whether to appeal a federal appeals court ruling that struck down a ban on gun ownership for cannabis users, and it has secured additional time from the U.S. Supreme Court to make its decision. On Friday, the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, filed a motion with the Supreme Court requesting an extension until November 25th, 2024 to determine whether to seek a review of the August 2024 decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit in the case of United States versus Daniels. The Supreme Court granted the extension, giving the administration more time to weigh its options, and the Fifth Court's 2-1 ruling found that the federal prohibition on firearms possession by cannabis users violates the Second Amendment. The case centers on Paola Connolly, a Texas woman who was prosecuted for possessing firearms while using cannabis. And the court's majority opinion, written by Circuit Judge Kurt D. Egenhart, stated in a quote, "The government has not shown that prohibiting cannabis users from possessing firearms is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation." Earnhardt, a Trump appointee, was joined by Circuit Judge Andrew S. Oldham, another Trump appointee, while Circuit Judge Stephen A. Higginson, appointed by President Obama, dissented. The DOJ's motion for an extension noted that the Solicitor General is still evaluating whether to file a petition for a writ of certiorari, and the Solicitor General has not yet determined whether to file a petition for a writ of certiorari in this case. The filing said, adding that the extension was needed due to the press of matters pending before the court. They say this case is part of a broader legal landscape challenge challenging federal regulations on gun ownership for cannabis users, particularly in light of the Supreme Court's 2022 decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. The Bruin ruling established a new test for evaluating gun laws, requiring that restrictions be consistent with the, in quotes, historical tradition of firearm regulation. And in the U.S. Fifth Circuit's decision, Daniels relied heavily on the Bruin, arguing that historical laws disarming dangerous individuals, such as felons or the mentally ill, did not extend to cannabis users absent evidence of dangerousness. Other federal courts have issued conflicting rulings on similar cases, and for example, the Third Circuit upheld the federal ban on gun possession by cannabis users in August of 2023, while district courts in Oklahoma and Texas have struck down related restrictions. And the 11th Circuit is also considering a challenge to the ban brought by the Florida Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, who has argued that her medical cannabis use should not strip her of her Second Amendment rights. The Supreme Court itself has signaled interest in resolving these inconsistencies. In September of 2024, the court requested supplemental briefing in a related case, United States versus Perez, to address whether cannabis use alone justifies disarmament under Bruin. The case, however, was dismissed as improvidently granted on October 15, 2024, leaving the Daniels case as a potential vehicle for the court to clarify the issue. Gun rights and cannabis advocacy groups have been vocal on the matter, and the Second Amendment Foundation, which filed the amicus brief in Daniels, celebrated the Fifth Circuit's ruling, with Executive Director Adam Crott stating in a quote, "This decision is a significant victory for Second Amendment rights and common sense." Cannabis policy advocates such as NORML have also supported the ruling, arguing that cannabis users should not face penalties for exercising constitutional rights. NORML Deputy Director Paul Armentano said in a quote, "It is illogical and discriminatory to treat cannabis consumers as second-class citizens when it comes to their Second Amendment protections." The Trump administration's hesitation to appeal may reflect political considerations, and President Trump has expressed support for cannabis reform, stating during his 2024 campaign that he would back rescheduling of cannabis to a Schedule III and protect state-level cannabis programs. In September of 2024, in a Truth Social post, Trump wrote in a quote, "We will continue to support the creation of a new category for cannabis that protects the rights of law-abiding citizens while keeping our communities safe." However, the administration has also faced pressure from conservative groups and law enforcement organizations such as the National Fraternal Order of Police, which argue that cannabis use correlates with increased risk of gun violence, though no definitive data supports this claim in the context of legal cannabis users. If the DOJ opts to appeal, the Supreme Court could take up the case in its 2024-2025 term and potentially issuing a landmark ruling on the intersection of cannabis policy and Second Amendment rights. And if the administration declines to appeal, the Fifth Circuit's ruling will stand and effectively nullifying the federal gun ban for cannabis users in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and setting a precedent for other circuits to follow. But for now, the administration's request for more time underscores the complexity of balancing cannabis reform, gun rights, and federal law enforcement priorities, and the Supreme Court's deadline extension ensures that this issue will remain unresolved until at least late November of 2025, you guys. And I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this.
I got a few things as being involved in this situation and different aspects. I had a Department of Corrections officer who was fired for his medical cannabis use here in the state of Florida, and the appellate courts relied on the federal issue and the federal rulings on it. Federal rulings are all over the place on this issue. Even in criminal circumstances, we've had federal courts, including the Eastern District of Oklahoma, say that even possession of cannabis illegally, not even having a medical marijuana card and a gun, was no longer sufficient to be a separate offense because of the issue of intoxication. And so the Bruin case exactly went back there, and they said, in the history of our culture, in our society, when they originally wrote this amendment, what did it mean? And they said, well, people who drink are allowed to possess guns and have guns.
Yep.
You shouldn't be intoxicated and under the influence while possessing the gun. But other than that, it's always been legal to do both of those things. So that's really the fundamental argument in this question. I think it's bullshit that they're pushing this down the road. You know, this is a very simple argument. It's been litigated throughout this country as far as the rights. It's because they don't have anything to show the support for their cause to win. And they know if they can't win, that this is state, nationwide precedent. It doesn't just affect, those few states. In Florida, it's an issue for employee rights issues. And still some jurisdictions, we have people get arrested for it. Mostly the charges get dismissed on the state level, but this is a big issue that's happening. Nikki Fried, unfortunately, the Department of Agriculture, when she left, is no longer part of that lawsuit, but that lawsuit is pending before the 11th District Court of Appeal. It has, they had oral arguments, I want to say, in October of 24. So we've been waiting for an opinion on that issue any day now. And, I hope the new Commissioner of Agriculture that comes in 2026 gets back involved in that lawsuit and continues to fight for people's and patients' rights. You're thinking about patients, you're thinking about vulnerable people in all respects. Now they don't have the ability to protect themselves. That seems un-American and unconstitutional.
I totally agree.
100%. The first step in enslaving a population is disarming them.
Yep.
Which is why felons are banned from having firearms for the rest of their lives. So you make a bad choice when you're 19 years old, blah, 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 blah. You serve your sentence, you pay your price to society. Country was founded on these Judeo-Christian ideals of redemption and blah, 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 blah. And now you're 69 years old. You want to go duck hunting with your grandchild in the Delta, and you can't even hold a shotgun. And so, but let's have an expungement clinic. So it's ridiculous. And if we look at the history of open carry in this country, it wasn't the Tea Party 15 years ago saying, don't tread on me. It was the Black Panther Party in the late 60s and 70s carrying shotguns while in Sacramento or the East Bay. And so this idea of banning people who have a felony from ever owning a firearm overlays, if you look at the timelines, perfectly with what the Nixon administration did, disproportionately impacting against communities of color when it came to cannabis prohibition.
And shout out to Miss Anna Lewis, who just sent us a super chat, who says, happy Monday. Loved all the Hyatt Niners and weed for the people, you guys. Much love.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Anna.
This is... It's frustrating because of all the reasons that Yarrow said, because how dare we scare some white people, oopsie poopsie, so now there's all this ridiculous gun bans. There's a difference, and if we can't keep people who are absolutely psychotic from purchasing guns, then somebody who's smoking a joint because their back hurts after working all day at their 9-to-5 job, paying taxes and being a productive parent, family member, church member, whatever, we have a problem. We have a mental health crisis. We don't have a people who use cannabis having guns crisis in the country.
And, typically when people talk about gun reform, that sounds like they're trying to limit people's access to firearms. But the truth is, the Second Amendment did have a dependency clause that, and often gets misquoted by not including the whole Second Amendment, which is a well-regulated militia. Most people who have guns are not part of a well-regulated militia. And let's also be honest, when you open up the newspaper and another school is being shot up, does it make sense to maybe restrict people under 25 years old from having large capacity magazines with assault weapons? Probably, yeah. Because if you look at most of the people who are shooting up schools, a lot of them are people under 25. And we talk on this show, and we talk about the science of cannabis, about how people's brains don't fully develop until 25. You know, maybe if you're under 25, you can go plink with something besides a weapon that was designed for war. Let's not pretend like the AR-15 is for hunting deer. And look, I say that with a history that, I mean, I'm not against firearms. And when we banned people for life from that Second Amendment because they've had a felony conviction that may have nothing to do with violence, it may have nothing to do with guns, that's not fair. So I'm actually kind of hopeful that cannabis could be the vehicle by which we talk about gun reform, not just in terms of meaningful restriction, but meaningful access. I don't see how felons need to get a pardon in order to get their gun rights reinstated, but there's an expungement clinic on every block in every city every weekend.
Well, here's the word: gun rights. The right to bear arms. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And like, I agree with you, Yarrow. It's people under 25, but they're grabbing those guns. That's a parenting issue. These school shootings are a parenting issue. This is an irresponsible parent who is leaving a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon around their children where they can access it. There's gun safes for a reason, and your kids shouldn't know where the fucking key to it is. This is literally something that could be stopped and could be prevented. Pay attention to your kids. Think of the children. Think of the children. You think of your own fucking children. It's time to parent. So I agree, Yarrow, but also I'm a Southern girl and I'm a big fan of a good old AR-15.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah, that's a parenting issue. You know, there was a case last year in front of the Supreme Court. It was like a domestic violence abuser who threatened his woman with a weapon, trying to get his gun rights back, and the court said no in that situation. So these cases regarding gun rights are coming rapidly at the Supreme Court, and I think they will continue to flush out, because that Bruin case really changed the entire analogy and things that the court had to determine in deciding, the Second Amendment right, what it really means. So I do. There has been fundamental changes already across our country regarding it, and I think that'll continue over the next couple of years. And I hope the 11th Circuit does come back, and it seems like either way that they come back with a decision, it's going to conflict with one of the two cases, which puts another reason why our Supreme Court should review this. Yeah, no, I agree with you, Michael, that our Supreme Court definitely needs to take this up. And I wonder if some of the hesitancy is around the fact that another justice could be retiring soon, and then at the same time too, the recent decisions by Justice Amy Coney Barnett. I just wonder if any of that plays into it. But Jesse, what do you have to say about any of this?
I mean, it kind of sounds like it ties to Jenny's story. You're gonna arm the DCC and disarm people with cannabis. What do you end up with there?
A big problem.
A police state.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like the way this is heading. I mean, I've never liked the way this is heading. Cannabis should not be related to gun ownership at all. There should no correlation. Nothing that needs to be talked about there. Silly policy that the government continues. Go for it, Yarrow, and then we're gonna move to the next story.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, I got you, buddy.
The challenge with this is that this is going to really, really cause conservatives to have to really think about how they rule based on their professed ideology and the planks of the party, because never have we seen a collab between the NRA and Cal Normal or Normal, right? And so this idea that there's going to be this true libertarian cause around sort of like less regulation and people having access to plant medicine, and this idea that it's overregulation to ban people from having firearms because of cannabis use or because of felonies for life. Like, the chances that those come together, it's going to be really interesting to see if a heavily majority conservative court is willing to rule along based on their professed politics.
Yeah.
Because my guess would be that because it's cannabis, they don't.
Fair.
We got to get Yarrow off the edge of his seat because he's going to
Fair
fall off
enough.
the phone book.
I know. We're going to roll right into Mr. Attorney at Law, Mr. Michael Minardi. He's the founder of Minardi Law out there in the great red state of Florida, and he's been helping patients and caregivers navigate the troublesome waters out there in Florida for over the last 20 years. That's right. Representing Minardi Law, it is Mr. Michael Minardi.
Hello, everyone. Happy high at noon on the East Coast. We're excited to talk about the continued hypocrisy of our government and the cannabis laws. This article today is near and dear to my heart because I know a few patients that are on this list. U.S. government still ships tins of cannabis joints to patients each month. And I'm lucky enough to have one of these tins of cannabis that is empty. This was sent in, what year was this? This is probably 20 years ago. Sent to Irvin Rosenfeld, but everyone knows that they get an empty tin of cannabis full of pre-rolled joints. Let's hear this article. The little-known arrangement and a holdover from a federal program that began in the 1970s when the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program was created to supply cannabis to patients with serious medical conditions. For decades, while most Americans face arrest for using marijuana, even for medical reasons, a select few legally lit up with Uncle Sam's blessing. And it was provided to them with our taxpayer dollars. This is how the story of how the program got started, why it stopped accepting new patients, and why the federal government is still, to this day, mailing marijuana to its last surviving participant. The Compassionate IND program has its roots set in court case in 1975. Case near and dear to my heart. A Washington, D.C. resident named Robert C. Randall, who had a glaucoma. This is the serious illness that our federal government gave people cannabis for. Was arrested for growing cannabis use to relieve his eye pressure. Facing potential blindness, Randall invoked a medical necessity defense, arguing that the medicine was essential for treating his condition. He petitioned the FDA to access the government-grown cannabis, and he became the first American since 1937 to legally receive marijuana for medical use. The federal government quietly sent him a monthly supply of cannabis grown at a government-contracted farm as part of that program. Realize, at least today, that amount is 10 to 12 marijuana cigarettes per day, about 3/4 of a pound that they get every 28 days. When bureaucratic hurdles later cut off Randall's supply in 78, he said again and won. Rather than opening the floodgates to let patients grow their own marijuana, federal drug officials crafted a controlled compromise. They expanded the IND program, a framework used to provide experimental medications to seriously ill programs. The program's purpose was narrow but groundbreaking, to allow certain patients with grave and chronic illnesses to receive regular government-supplied doses of cannabis for therapeutic use. Each patient's cannabis use should be considered part of a research study requiring regulatory approvals but granted immunity from prosecution. Under the Compassionate IND protocol, doctors obtained special approval. They only a dozen so patients. There were 13 patients total. Once approved, though, these few had an arrangement that most seem unreal today. The federal government became their marijuana supplier. All cannabis in the program is still grown at the secure facility.
We're losing your audio, Mike.
They grow a lot, and they basically roll it into the cigarette.
Mike,
can you guys hear me still?
Super choppy.
Yeah. We're losing your audio, Michael. I'm not sure what's going on.
I don't either, because it's fine out here. Medium potency, they're about 3 to 4%, and include instructions for rehydrating very dry cigarettes before use. It's shipped by FedEx to local pharmacies. Patients are typically instructed to smoke 10 to 12 joints per day. One patient, stockbroker Irvin Rosen, who has also wrote a book about his journey and a good friend, has smoked over 175,000 joints since he has joined the program in 1992. Yet he says the low potency never intoxicating him. It simply eases his pain for his recent bone disorder. And he has, been fighting for over 30 years, the stopping of arresting people for medical use. The irony underscores the duality of the IND program. It made the federal government both a provider and an enforcer against it. Despite requiring participants to log their usage and health effects in periodic reports, officials did little to study the medicine when they were supplying it. The idea was to treat cannabis as an investigational new drug, but in reality, the program functioned as a humanitarian gesture than a rigorous clinical trial. A long-term study in 2002 eventually examined 4 of the patients and found that cannabis effectively treated their conditions while causing no significant adverse side effects. All 4 were stable in health and needed fewer standard pharmaceuticals as a result. This hinted at what the government has declined to officially acknowledge. For these patients, marijuana was truly working as a medicine. The closure, they closed it in the 1990s by George W. Bush. My understanding, it was because they continued to get but they state it was because patients could pursue alternatives like Marinol and synthetic THC instead of smoked marijuana. Politics clearly played a role. Internal members showed the concern that the program undermined the war on drugs, and some observers noted that many of the new applications were those that you guys must know in California, gay men with AIDS patients. That's why we love Mr. Perone, right? A group toward whom there was considerable stigma at the time, hundreds of thousands of legal marijuana patients, the Bush administration slammed the door shut. The closure decision sparked outrage amongst medical marijuana advocates when they are citizens, the very sick Americans for political reasons, criticized activist Kevin Zeese at the time. 28 approved patients who had been waiting for their first cannabis shipment saw it rescinded overnight. Only the patients who were already receiving, the 13 people, were grandfathered in and allowed to continue for as long as they lived. And I know Urban still gets it to this day. More than 30 years later, most of the patients have died. It's my understanding, as of 23, there are 2 alive, Elvie Masuki and Irvin Rosenfeld. Elvie Masuki also is for glaucoma. And it's really today millions of medical marijuana patients across the U.S. suffer from this issue. Substance. This was a great program that they had back then. And again, politics buried cannabis as a medicine, just like Hearst, Anslinger and Mellon did back in the 20s. And it's just sad that people, and this human rights violation continues today, and people can no longer apply for this program. We're lucky that there's medical marijuana states across this country, but it's something that I'm fighting for in this state. We only have 2.5 ounces every 35 days for our patients, whereas the federal government, sends 3/4 of a pound every 28 days to their patients. So what do you guys think about this program, the history of it, and whether or not the federal government can continue their hypocrisy over this issue?
Well, I mean, the federal government is always going to continue their hypocrisy. I feel, Michael. I don't think anything is going to change from that, whether it's cannabis or a whole host of other issues. But I've met Mr. Irv back in the day. He came out to California for a while for there was some convention going on that he came out. So I got the opportunity to meet him, and he was telling me about his condition. His condition is so rare, and like you can feel like all of these different knots all throughout his body. Like it's really, I was really tripped out, and I know he has immense pain. And he's from the financial world. Like he does, capital raises and things like that. And he's out there in your state, out in Florida. And then, like you mentioned, Elvie's been, living in Northern California for a number of years, and she suffers from glaucoma, and she's been part of the community in Northern California for a long time. And I know some people that were actually growing back in the day with Elvie that were caregivers for Elvie, and they were using that as a cover, saying, hey, we're producing for a federal patient, and in hopes that would give some kind of cover for that cultivation. But this is a fascinating story, and the hypocrisy is never going to stop with cannabis, and the fact that the government doesn't grow anything stronger than THC Delta 6 because it gums up their rolling machines is just even more, more craziness to add on to this. And
why didn't Elon with the Doji, DG decide that it would be more efficient for the government to outsource this to some amazing cultivator in California and drop shit?
That's a great idea. Maybe we'll reach out to them and offer that possible, and tell them to open the program up, because this program originally was created under Reagan, if I remember correctly, and then like I think as you stated, Michael, was shut down under Bush #1, and they only allowed for the first initial 13 people to even be eligible for the program.
The critical footnote to those two presidents is the first one was embroiled in the Iran-Contra scandal, where they were taking drugs and selling drugs to finance quote-unquote freedom fighters in Central America. And the second one was the head of the CIA, when the CIA was pushing cocaine into the United States. So both of these elected drug dealers decided that medical cannabis patients weren't as important as their other goals.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the American-made movie, right? And watching those hearings in the 80s of like Holly North and that stuff is really a big reason why I got into politics and become an attorney. Because of just listening to that hypocrisy and the craziness of it, right? They're running it in the back door so they can set up their coups, and shipping it into our country, to destroy the American public and the people at the time. It's really disgusting, and it continues to push that this is a human rights violation. I think we really got to start talking about it like that.
I agree with that. I agree with you on that, Michael. It is a human rights violation. Jenny, you have anything you want to say on this, or Jesse, before we move on?
I want one of the tins. If anyone has any of the tins, I really want one. I've always wanted one, especially with the stickers on it.
Yeah.
I definitely never want to smoke that weed. It's legendary. It's legendary how bad it is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's supposedly the worst weed in the world.
It's kind of like a time machine. It's kind of like Bammer weed, because they still roll up the seeds and stems and stuff in there too.
It's worse than Bammer, I've heard. It's not even like It's like you'd rather get some brick that smells like gas and looks black than this stuff.
Well, my understanding is they grind it all up to roll it.
They do.
Yeah.
This is from April 1996 that I have. I can talk to her for you, buddy.
Yeah. See if you can get us some of those, Michael. That would be fantastic.
I need a tin super bad for my collection. It's a graphic design masterpiece.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Jenny, before we move on?
Get me a 10 too.
All right. Look at that. 10. Yeah, we'll be right back after this commercial break. All right, stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you smash that like button. I know we'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And all of the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website at www.highat9news.com. And make sure you go into the bio of this video and check out all the sponsors that help support the show, as well as use the link to order yourself a case of Liberal Tears today, shipped directly to your door. 150 milligrams of caffeine in every can and 0 grams of sugar, you guys.
I just ordered the summertime strawberry salad when added steak on top here at Anna's. Make sure you do the same thing too next time you're in downtown Long Beach. Come on down and check out Anna's joint. on the 400 block of Pine Street. They have amazing selection of beers, foods, and when you come down here to Anna's, you can even challenge me to a game of shuffleboard if you want to lose. Did you get that? So, next time you're in downtown Long Beach on Pine Avenue, make sure you stop by Anna's Joint on the 400 block. Not only do they have Anna's Joint, this restaurant and bar, but they also have the amazing deli next door, and then next door to that they have a very exotic flower shop. You may want to stop by and say hi. Yes, and we are back, you guys. Are you ready for intros now, Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yarrow, unstrap. I have to take you off the shelf.
Unstrap.
We tie him up there so he doesn't fall off the phone book.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no. Anyways, coming straight out of the Shire, the angriest elf on the Hyatt 9 shelf.
Hold on,
The
Jenny.
resident real estate self-proclaimed guru.
Hold on, Jenny. Yeah, we have Jesse up next, Jenny.
Is going to have to wait and stay on the shelf a little longer because the founder of Barney Design Co., Gwen Barney's husband, and the ginger grandpa ninja at the Hyatt 9 is Jesse Barney.
Nice switch.
Yes.
All right, let's go. I like it. No problem recovering there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jenny. My story comes out of the Hemp Gazette this morning. The headline is Germany sets new record for medical cannabis imports by Terry, and this is a fun last name, Lassitinaz, I think. Or Lassitinaz. I have no idea. Well, Germany's imports of medical cannabis in the first quarter of this year were more than 4 times that of the same period in 2024. It just keeps going up and up and up every single year. According to the country's Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices, 37.223 tons of cannabis, that's metric tons, and that'd be about 80,000 pounds. For medical and scientific purposes in the form of dried flower and extracts were imported into the country in the first 3 months of 2025 compared to 8 tons in Q1 2024. The leading originating sources of this cannabis were Canada, providing 16 tons, followed by Portugal with just a little over 12, and Denmark with almost 3. Australia's contribution for the period was a bit player, which I think means a small player, at just 804 kilograms or about 1,600 pounds. So even Australia, one of the most illegal countries in the world, is growing weed to ship to Germany, but not America. Australian cannabis could see a bigger year in 2025, considering imports from Australia for the full year of 2024 amounted to 1.4 tons. Germany legalized the use of cannabis for medical purposes in 2017. And I went ahead and looked up how much, because they didn't grow any weed in the country in 2017, and they really haven't grown much weed at all in the country. So they've been importing all of their weed from all over the world, everywhere but America, because we just can't get our heads out of our butts in the cannabis industry in America. So they imported about 500 kilograms, which is about 1,200 pounds, almost 1,100 that, right away in 2017, and it's just gone up. It's more than doubled every single year, and now we're at 80,000 pounds. So. In 2017, the German Parliament passed the Cannabis Act, and in February 24, which further legalized cannabis for recreational use. A doctor can prescribe medical cannabis when they believe it is appropriate for a patient's serious medical condition if a standard therapy is not available or proves unsuitable. Health insurance companies will often reimburse the cost of the prescription, but Germany has always had an issue with the lack of local supply. Hence, high levels of imports accelerated by changes to related regulations, making medical cannabis easier to access. However, domestic production has been picking up as it is no longer restricted by centralized tenders and redistribution, but is now open to any producer who obtains a license. Domestic production has been limited to 2.6 tons compared to 37 some that they're importing. And the few producers successful in the tendering process were required deliver production. There's some translation problems. Delivery production to the National Cannabis Agency, which was then responsible for distribution. So apparently they have to grow it and then deliver it to the National Cannabis Agency, which then distributes it. In July last year, Germany's Demacan became the first German company to receive a cultivation license for medical cannabis under the new medical cannabis law. At the time, the company said this would allow it to immediately double its production. In terms of recreational cannabis, adults can cultivate up to 3 plants per person of legal age at their residence for the purpose of personal consumption, and an adult may store up to 50 grams of dried cannabis for personal consumption there. Well, this story is really important because as America was the leader, especially California, and it's funny how we covered a story where California is basically going back to the days of Anslinger and creating a new prohibition arm that's going to be armed and taking your money and going into all of your stuff. Germany and Canada and Australia and Denmark and other countries are trading internationally. So while America should be the leader in cannabis, we're falling behind. And it reminds me of Frenchy Cannoli and his rants. He would rant about this constantly, about how Germany was importing cannabis and about how more than 80% of the weed consumption in the world is through hash. And that's all grown in Lebanon and Morocco and Kazakhstan and Afghanistan, all these other countries. And when this switch finally hits, America is going to be left in the dust because we cannot produce oil nearly at the level that those countries can. And Germany is creating this international trade. And if we don't get in on it, we're going to stay behind. Jesse Barney with High at 9 News, and I'll toss it over to my fellow correspondents and see what.
Oh, Jenny, I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about this because I know you love some German weed.
Yeah, I'm doing a cap raise right now for a German company. So yeah, I mean, most of their cannabis is imported. It's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for the U.S. to get their heads out of their asses, and just like the rest of the world, Germany loves California weed. Why can't we send it to them legally? Why can't we figure out how to get with the times? We started this shit off, and now we're falling behind nearly every other country who's coming up with legalization programs. So, I'm excited to see what Germany holds. I know the new government is a little bit more conservative than the old government and is trying to roll some things back. But I think the toothpaste is probably far too out of the tube at this point. But yeah. Yarrow, what?
No, I like the German market. I was thoroughly impressed with the annual seed sales in 2023. I'm very appreciative that they have a home grow. I like that there are sort of the Amsterdam-y style collectives, although those are capped at a certain number of members. It's about time Germans had a good gas, and I'm not mad at it. I think that when we talk about the boo for the mid-tier cannabis that they're getting from other countries, it's important to also be able to acknowledge that if Germans are able to grow their own cannabis, then, which I believe is a part of their rules and regs, then they're not limited to tumbleweed from Australia or cannabis from either Canada or Israel. And as long as they want to continue to import it, as Jesse said, the United States is missing out on a fantastic opportunity to be a trade partner.
Very, very, very true.
And it's more than that, Yarrow, because this is starting precedent. I mean, that's what's really happening. And if you look back from 2017 to today, it's been an exponential increase in trade, literally exponential. If you look at the graph, it's going like this. It's very crazy. And they're just setting the example for this international trade. And pretty soon, we're not going to be talking about 30 tons. We're going to talk at 80,000 pounds. We're going to be talking about millions of pounds. And the entire cannabis market in California, including the unregulated, is what, a couple million pounds? And all of that could be being shipped to countries all over the world. Because as you said, as Jenny said, California cannabis still has some of the biggest brand power in the world for the best weed in the world. And they're just not taking advantage of it. America's not taking advantage of it. And it's crazy.
But you know what? People are oh, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to, it's those police benevolent associations and DEA continuing to lobby against cannabis that prevents us from getting the economic windfall that we should be able to, and regulate the markets, equalize the markets, allow these companies to be profitable and pay tax dollars to help out these states at reasonable rates. It's just ridiculous that we're not into this. And it's the same thing with hemp over the last 70 years, right? That we didn't have legal in this state. Every other country was still growing as a crop, using in their products. And it's just going to stop. It's just going to stop.
I'm with you on that. I am with you on that. Yarrow, you have anything you want to say before we move on?
No, I think I'm bullish on Germany, and I think and the European Union in general. Germans are known for being very efficient, and when California can export to Germany, I am going to do a very weird happy dance that looks like a grand mal seizure, but it's overdue.
Fair enough. I mean, and the trap market loves them some Germany. You know what I mean? Because I see tons of brands working to get their products out to Europe on a constant basis. And on that, we're going to roll into our final commercial, and we're going to be right back.
Oh man, your knees still bothering you, man?
Yeah, my left one, you know? But I'll tell you what, I've been using this new CBD cream, and it works like a miracle.
CBDs? I done heard about them CBDs. I was out there on them Twitters the other day, and I heard they get you high as a kite.
Well, not this stuff. This stuff is tested. Every batch, all the way through, pharmaceutical grade, and in a GMP certified facility, so you know you're not going to have to worry about flying high.
GMP certified? I might have to try some of this out. Where do I even find this?
You go directly to aimhighhemp.com and they will ship it to your door right away. Tested. It's not a name, it's a promise.
Yes, and we are back, Jenny Beth.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, look at him. He's all perked up because he knows I'm going to intro him, and this is the most attention he gets all day, and he's very excited. From the Shire, on top of a lily pad with a long pipe, smoking real estate, and sometimes vape cartridges, Yarrow Kubrin.
Thank you, Jenny. Good morning. Good morning, High at 9 News viewers. Monday, June 2nd, rounding out about 10:15 Pacific time. Yarrow Kubrin here. My story today brings us all the way to the Manatee State, southeast of here to Florida, and back again for the fight for a more reasonable set of regulations out there. So without further ado, from the Marijuana Herald, hot off the press and published today, Smart and Safe Florida submits 377,839 ballot signatures for the 2026 marijuana legalization ballot effort. Smart and Safe Florida has now submitted ballot signatures to the Florida Division of Elections in support of their proposed constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana, accounting for 42% of the over 880,000 signatures that are required by February of 2026. The initiative, which was approved for circulation in January, would legalize the possession, purchase, and use of marijuana for individuals 21 and older. It would allow existing medical marijuana treatment centers to serve the recreational market and would allow additional adult use licenses to be issued. The measure would cap possession at 2 ounces per adult and prohibit public smoking and vaping. The campaign has raised about $20 million to date, primarily from True Leaf, which has dozens of medical marijuana dispensaries throughout Florida. The newest batch of signatures by far surpasses the 25% requirement for the initiative to be issued an official judicial and financial impact review. The measure builds on the language of Amendment 3 from before, which earned 56% of the support from voters in 2024, falling just a little short of the needed 60% for passage. If approved by voters in 2026, the new amendment would take effect 6 months after Election Day, making Florida the next in a growing list of states to legalize recreational marijuana. I kick this back to my fellow cohorts before I tell you my opinions on the story. Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News.
Michael, I think you should go first. You're in Florida. What do you have to say about this?
So, and I think I started off my series here doing an article about the ballot initiative laws that we passed. So it's my understanding that there's a current lawsuit as well by Smart and Safe against the government related to those additional restrictions they put in for signature collection and things of that nature. So that is pending as well. But, we knew that this was going to happen. It's great news. Whether or not we can get the 60% in an off-presidential year hasn't been done in Florida on a marijuana amendment. Marijuana on the presidential election. We failed on the governor's election last time. So we'll see what happens here. I do like that they kind of expanded and changed some of the things in this amendment that they blocked against, but they'll get to the first hurdle, get past Supreme Court review, which I don't think they should have a problem doing. And hopefully, we'll have a chance to vote on this before our legislators make it impossible for us to do ballot initiatives in Florida.
I mean,
the devil's always in the details, right? And so when they say that you're only allowed to have a couple ounces, what happens if you have 2.5 ounces? And I don't believe home grow is in there yet. So any adult use without home grow is a purposeful missed opportunity to make plant medicine available to people at little to no cost.
Well,
please fire away.
The reason why it's not in there is because to get a ballot initiative past Supreme Court review, it has to only embrace one single subject. And the idea is that having both home cultivation and the regulation and adult use in it would violate that single subject rule. So that's specifically why they don't have it in there.
That's an argument that's being used to add credibility to a barrier to entry that this isn't going to solve for. Because I think the counter argument to that is that because this is regulation related to cannabis, and because regulation of cannabis is multifaceted and nuanced and complicated, it would be more efficient to allow voters to decide on many of the sub-issues in a single costly and laborious ballot initiative process.
Well, I just think that they should run two parallel voter initiatives at the same time, and vote yes on A, vote yes on B, and just if they really have that type of a commitment, that's what they need to do, because they can sit out there and get the same amount of signatures at the same time on both of those things. It's not it's gonna cost them extra money for that. It's the same amount of time that people are gonna put in, and if people's gonna sign one, they're gonna sign the other. So it's really it's encouraging people, and there may be some people that will sign the home grow one but won't sign the other one or whatnot. But nonetheless, they're getting a whole bunch of signatures on there, and they're garnering a lot of support, and they're going to get a lot of public sentiment in favor of this overall. And the whole community is not going to have anything to say bad against them when they do something like that.
From your mouth to God's ears, man, this is something, I ran multiple ballot initiatives here in the state of Florida, which included an open horizontal market and home cultivation. It didn't pass Supreme Court review, the one we got there to. But we definitely were hoping that they would do that when they originally launched Smart and Safe. We were in contact with them, truly donated to our Regulate Florida campaign as well. And I presented the language to them, short and sweet and simple on it. And, there wasn't an appetite for it. And there would be additional cost in that to the state. They would have to pay then double for the verification of the petitions to the state. But I think you're right. It would absolutely, put it on the people then as to what you voted on, as opposed to last year, the big part against Amendment 3, argued by our governor and our Republican legislature. It's not your legalization because it doesn't include health.
Exactly.
Well, I'm with you on that, brother. I think that's exactly what we should do. And it's in order for me to not see it happen.
Yep. I'm with it. Do you have any final statements you want to make, Jesse or Yarrow, before we move into our final story of the day? All right.
Back like he never left because he's got more to say. The highest Republican on the High at 9 News, Jason Back.
Oh, thank you so much, Jenny Beth. Thank you so much. Well, Michael, I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are on this, because the U.S. Supreme Court could realistically end cannabis prohibition in the near future, you guys. Look at that. Some positive news, Yarrow, to end the show on today. Yep. The federal prohibition of cannabis may soon face its most significant challenge since its inception. On May 27th of 2025, the first U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals rejected a lawsuit by Massachusetts-based cannabis business seeking to overturn the federal ban on marijuana, and the plaintiffs argued that the federal prohibition is outdated, citing Congress's evolving stance and state-level legalization in 38 states, including Massachusetts. The court upheld the U.S. Supreme Court's 2005 decision in Gonzalez versus Raich, which affirmed Congress's authority to criminalize marijuana possession under the Commerce Clause and even in states allowing its medical use. Jonathan Schiller, founding partner of Boies and Schiller, Flexner, and chair of the Board of Trustees at Columbia University, who is representing the cannabis company, said, in quote, "It is fair to assume that we shall seek Supreme Court review," you guys. And this is fantastic news. Should the court accept the case, it would mark the first time in nearly 20 years that the justices re-examine the constitutionality of marijuana prohibition. And although most of the justices have not made public comments regarding cannabis laws, Justice Clarence Thomas has previously expressed skepticism about the federal government's inconsistent approach to marijuana policy. In a 2021 statement, he argued that the federal prohibition on marijuana, in quotes, may no longer be necessary or proper, end quote, highlighting the contradictions in federal enforcement and the evolving legal landscape across all states. If the Supreme Court takes up the case, the three liberal justices, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, and, the other one, are likely to side with Justice Thomas in ending prohibition. This means that just one of the remaining 5 justices would need to agree to end the federal ban, potentially on personal freedom grounds for prohibition to be put to an end. Some legal experts believe the case stands a realistic chance of being taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court. Jesse Alderman, co-chair of the cannabis practice at Foley Hogg LLP, said the court's current makeup may be more receptive than in past decades, and noting that several justices have shown empathy for how broadly previous U.S. Supreme Courts have treated the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause has long been the constitutional basis for federal marijuana prohibition, including in the 2005 Gonzalez versus Raich decision, where the court ruled that Congress could ban even locally grown and consumed cannabis because it could impact interstate commerce. Critics argue that this interpretation vastly overextends federal power, especially in today's landscape where dozens of states have legalized marijuana, and a narrower reading of the Commerce Clause by the court could undermine the constitutional foundation of federal prohibition. And when it comes to the 2005 ruling from the Supreme Court that validated prohibition, attorney David Boies says the factual basis for the 2005 decision no longer exists, stating in a quote, "I think there can be no doubt that the precedents of that decision no longer exist."
A realistic timeline for this process could see the Supreme Court deciding to hear the case in the coming months, with oral arguments potentially occurring in late 2025 or early 2026. A decision then could be expected by mid-2026 and potentially making it a key issue for the midterm elections, you guys. And as the legal landscape continues to evolve, the Supreme Court's potential review of the federal marijuana ban could mark a significant turning point in the U.S. cannabis policy. Well, that's pretty obvious, you guys, but nonetheless, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. Supreme Court, here we come. What do you think? Supreme Court or bust? Any of you guys? Really? Interesting.
I mean, Clarence Thomas needs a win because he has really smeared his own legacy with the gifts and graft and undisclosed financial benefits he has acquired as a result of his affiliation with a few billionaires. And so I wouldn't trust the guy, but if he wants to be on the right side of history for one issue, I won't be mad at that.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, we've had the grifters do great things for cannabis.
Yeah. Oh, you guys are funny. You guys are funny. What are your thoughts, Michael?
I constantly challenge cannabis case. I have the constitutionality of marijuana as a Schedule I substance, right? Because I don't think there's any rational basis for it. And Clarence Thomas, and I think your comment that you're talking about is the thing that he made in the Sue Sicily challenge at one point, challenging the Schedule I's controlled substance, that they said that that wasn't administratively done correctly. But he did say, in the proper case before them, that this is untenable. The hodgepodge of half in, half out cannabis policy that our U.S. government is doing is unconstitutional. It doesn't make sense. And unlike the Commerce Clause with regards to hemp, right, because the rulings on that have been the opposite than they are on marijuana, on the irony of that. So hopefully they can get behind this. They absolutely should review this and the gun rights case. It would be a great year for cannabis if both of those cases won before the Supreme Court in the U.S. and really end these human rights violations once and for all. But I think it's a great case. I love how it was written up. I think it's centered mostly around taxes for these companies and 280E issues. The lawsuit actually, and that they shouldn't have to pay that because they're operating as real businesses. And I agree wholeheartedly with that lawsuit, and I hope that it goes forward and that the Supreme Court takes it, because I think that it's really hard for them to, talk in real language and justify the continued prohibition of this plan when, it's proliferating throughout this country.
I couldn't agree more, and hopefully we do get to that stage, and I'm with you on that. Like I said, I told you we try to end the show on a happy note. Did you like that?
Oh, you wouldn't have cut out.
I was just saying, Yarrow, we tried to end the show on a happy note. Did you appreciate that, Yarrow?
I did. I do. Good. I think that we need those happy moments. I think this is a very troubling, choppy, turbulent industry across many markets and states. And so I really appreciated Jesse's article today. I really appreciated sharing kind of an up note. And I'm optimistic because in the absence of that optimism, what are we even doing here?
Fair enough. Fair enough. And on that, thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big shout out to our audience and supporters for tuning in daily and listening to the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Huge thank you to Aim High Hemp Distribution, Tested, and Catalyst for helping us keep the lights on over here. And thank you to our correspondents for being absolutely amazing. Thank you to Cannabis Sativa L for giving us a reason to do this every day. And thank you to Cloud Media Partners Anthony out there in the metaverse somewhere. And thank you all for tuning in and getting high at 9 with us. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show. And we are